Good morning, guys. Welcome to my unboxing and review of the high-grade D Gundam First. This is a premium Bandai release that came out, well, actually, it's last month as of the filming of this video. I got my April shipment a little late this month, but it's here. This came out in April 2025, at least in the States, and as you can see on the cover here, this is the kind of protagonist mobile suit for the prequel manga to Char's Counterattack, Double Fake Under the Gundam. From what I'm aware of, this kit is a brand new mold that released on P Bandai, unfortunately, but the manga is obscure enough. It's, I think, 35 years old at this point, that I don't think it really warranted a standard release, and this is what P Bandai was for, to get model kits of obscure suits that doesn't really have the mass appeal to justify a full standard release. I got this kit for around $26 on P Bandai, which is around the ballpark of like some premium high grades. Think of things like the high grade Immortal Justice or the Mighty Strike Freedom from the high grade Seed Freedom line. So I'm expecting this to be a fairly nice high grade with all brand new parts, but I'm not exactly sure exactly what to expect because, again, this is a brand new mold and we haven't really seen anything like it. This mobile suit isn't actually a mobile suit, it's a mobile worker that's disguising itself as a Gundam, because I think in the manga, the main character is working for like a construction company or something, very similar to Lo in Astray, except instead of finding like a super advanced mobile suit to pilot as his protagonist suit, he instead really modifies his mobile worker, essentially a construction vehicle, to resemble and become a Gundam, which he is very much a fan of, and it's so effective that the D Gundam First is actually mistaken for the actual one-year war Gundam in universe. So that's kind of interesting. This is an imposter Gundam, as you can see, being a premium Bandai high grade in very standard fashion. This is going to be in a monochrome blue with really not much information on the box. So with all that out of the way, getting right into it. Inside the box we get 3 bags of runners, as well as this manual. Unfortunately, regressing in premium Bandai manual quality from some of the other premium Bandai kits I've taken a look at recently. This is going to be an all black and white, unfortunately, including the color guide, which is, again, a little unfortunate, but the usual information on the first sheet with the parts list, talking about double snipping parts off the runner for like a clean cut with minimal nub marks, as well as kind of attaching parts cleanly when you're building to avoid any kind of unnecessary gaps. So getting right into the build, getting right into the construction of the torso then, this looks like it's going to be a little more involved than a typical high grade. You see like more involved joints and things than is typical for a high grade. You see very nice armor layering, which I really like to see. It's very nice that they're kind of advancing the high grade in that fashion. And then you move on to the head here. Slightly more involved than usual, but not too much. It's still a high grade after all. Then you move on to the arms, which looks like it's going to be pretty typical for a high grade. You see incomplete inner frames with hollow parts in like the forearms and such. And then you move on to the legs, which does look like it's going to have a more complete inner frame because, again, being a modified mobile worker, a lot of this frame is going to be visible, so it looks like we are going to have some appropriately detailed high grade frame there for the legs. And then moving on to the waist, which looks very typical for a high grade. Then you get into the assembly of the full unit, you build the backpack there, and then you get into the accessories, which is the kind of really interesting part of this kit, in my opinion, because apart from the beam saber and the beam shotgun, all of the kind of weapons or accessories here aren't actually like really weapons. They're like construction equipment. So you have like rivet guns and zip lines and all this like all these other crazy pieces of equipment that you don't really get to see in a lot of kits. So I'm really interested to see how this actually poses with it and stuff. I do know this kit is going to come with a bunch of wires as seen in like the promotional art and stuff. So you can pose it like firing off like a grappling hook or a cable gun. I don't know exactly what it is, but yeah, that'll be interesting to see. So, getting through the contents of the bags. Inside the bags, we get 8 runners, which is a little more than the typical parts count from an average high grade. Again, this is priced a little more expensive. You get a little more in the box. This is going to be a little more involved compared to a typical high grade, but it shouldn't be anything too crazy. You will also get this foil color correcting sticker sheet. Some of this is to be expected, things like the eye stickers, camera stickers, all those metallic details, as well as a bunch of small yellow color correcting detail stickers. A little unfortunate, but again, it's a high grade. Some level of color correcting stickers for like small accents and things like that is to be expected. In addition, we will also get 2 different wires for use with the like grappling hook or whatever it's called. We get one that's a little bit long and then one that's a little bit short. So I don't know if I'm going to have to cut this myself like with a lot of other kits that include this kind of wire, but I'll let you know after the build. So Getting into the runners themselves. So these runners were printed in February of 2025 with a design date of 2024 because with the design day of 2024. Starting with runner A here, this will of course be specifically for the D Gundam First. In very typical high grade fashion, this is going to be our multicolor runner in 4 different colors. We get a primer gray here for a number of inner frame parts for the waist. You see parts for the torso and the backpack, some joint parts for the neck and such. You also get your hand parts here. Looks like we're going to be getting standard high grade holding hands as well as one open expressive hand. Unfortunately not one for both sides, but what are you going to do? It's a high grade. You are going to get red for some accent parts, including parts for the face and the feet. You are going to get yellow for a number of different accent parts, as well as the main kind of body of the shield. You also have accent parts for things like vent details, part for the chest, the V-fin, etc. And then we get some small parts in blue here for some auxiliary armor parts, including a part for the back of the torso. So while all these runners are like brand new for the D Gundam First, they're not all specifically for the D Gundam First, because runners B1 and B2 here are simply labeled D Gundam, which implies that we are probably going to be getting the D Gundam Second, the upgraded form of the D Gundam First, at some point in the future, almost certainly also a Premium Bandai exclusive, but who knows, maybe they'll do a Tri-Age thing where the Tri-Age was Premium Bandai, but the Tri-Age Magnum was a standard release. That's a real long shot. There's almost no way it's going to be anything other than Premium Bandai. But this is going to be all of our inner frame parts here. Runner B2 going to be a copy of most of the parts of B1 except for the parts here. I think these are like spools for the wiring, parts for the the zipline gun or whatever, and B2 is also going to include these 2 parts here. I'm not exactly sure what these are for. Runner C1 and C2, C2 being a copy of the top half of runner C1 here, going to be all of our white armor parts. So yeah, this is going to be all of the armor for things like the arms, legs, skirts, etc., and the head. It's also going to include the beam saber used with this kit. There are 2, but I think this kit only is supposed to use 1 beam saber. I think that's what I saw in the accessories spread. But you will get a second one if you want to have the D Gundam First dual wielding. Runners D1 and D2 here in a black color. D2 copying this bottom row of D1, as well as including a number of extra parts. This is including pretty much all of the parts we will need for our accessories here. You see very distinctive parts for the beam shotgun, an inner kind of frame part for the shield, some thruster details, parts for the zipline guns. So all of these parts we're going to be using for our accessories, as well as a part here for the collar. And last but not least, to use with the beam saber handles, we have the venerable SB13 for a set of standard 1/144th scale beam saber effect parts in clear pink. We've seen this runner a million times before, and it does the job fine. So with all that out of the way, I will see you after the build. Alright, welcome back. Here's the high-grade D Gundam First, snap belt panel lined and lightly painted, and this is a pretty interesting kit. I wasn't sure exactly what to expect when I started building this, but I was very pleasantly surprised in the quality of the build, the lack of color corrections needed, and the minor scale of the color corrections that are needed to be made to have a fully color accurate D Gundam First. I will note that when I go over the color inaccuracies and things like that, I don't have much to go off of. It's really just what's on the P Bandai website and the promotional images, as well as the very kind of grainy, low-quality line art that's available on the Gundam Wiki for the D Gundam First, because again, this is the protagonist Gundam, well, Gundam in quotes, the protagonist mobile worker turned Gundam of the prequel manga to Char's Counterattack, which is 35 years old at this point, so I doubt most people know about it or have read it. I have not. I only really found out about it during a rabbit hole deep dive on the Gundam Wiki, and then later when they announced it as a P Bandai kit. So getting into the build, despite being of higher quality than a lot of other high grades, this is still a high grade. There is not a complete inner frame in the lower arms here. That is missing a significant amount of inner frame, but there is still a lot more visible than on other kits, because again, this is a modified mobile worker, so it's supposed to look a little like homemade, a little with a lot of exposed inner frame parts to kind of indicate that this is kind of a slapped together a Gundam that wasn't actually designed and built as a Gundam first and foremost. So in terms of parts complexity, for the most part, it's very much in line with a typical modern high grade, no polycaps, which is quite nice. The torso is a little more involved than other high grades, as I mentioned earlier. There's a lot of parts layering and kind of slotting the shoulder joints into the pegs on the torso and stuff like that, which is almost a little master grade-y, like obviously nowhere close in terms of parts count, but in terms of the general kind of vibe of the construction and the general order and layering and the implementation of joints and stuff, it's very is very much not like the typical master grades that we would have seen in years past, which is quite pleasant. Things like the legs, there's a lot of exposed inner frame that's nicely detailed enough for a high grade, of course. You see things like the pistons down there, all of that is very nicely sculpted and molded. There's a lot of part separation I wasn't really expecting. Things like these little side thrusters here on the backpack. This is a separate piece, the one on the front is not, of course. These yellow parts on the shoulders, normally when you see those little sub-thrusters in other high grades, it's just kind of molded onto the shoulder and then you have to paint everything by yourself. Here, it is a separate yellow piece molded onto the kind of vent details that go underneath that gray part in the shoulder. You just need to shade in the black area around it to kind of give the illusion that it's a void. But it's a lot nicer than having it done the way they used to in older high grades. Having these little sub-thrusters being part separated, quite nice. Things like the little pistons in the forearms are color separated, or are parts separated. The exposed kind of lower torso here with these little pistons on the sides, those are separate parts. Always great to see. In the IBO kits, it's kind of a single molded part that goes on the bottom of the torso. Here, they are separate parts, which is, of course, always great to see. So a lot of part separation, a lot of very tiny parts on things like the weapons and such. For instance, on the beam torch here, the little tiny nub barrel here, I don't know how you can see that. That is a separate part. It's not molded into the two halves of the weapon that's sandwiched together. A lot of the weapons are like that. There's a very tiny barrel piece that you need to keep track of. I almost lost a couple of them. Like, there are a lot of very tiny parts. For instance, also on the torso here, this little tiny square, that horizontal line cutting through across that yellow part, that little horizontal line is a separate part. And I dropped it onto carpet, and it took me like half an hour to find it. It was not great. So be very careful when you're building this kit if you decide to get it. There are a lot of very tiny parts that are major loss risks, which sounds like a bad thing, but extra part separation is always a good thing. It's great that they're doing this. I really like all of the part separation on this kit that allows for a more accurate model than we would have gotten otherwise. In terms of aesthetics then, this is where this kit really, really shines. This feels a lot like an IBO kit that doesn't have the IBO kind of weirdness, especially in this lower midsection, where in those kits it's very kind of thin, gaunt, and skeletal. Here, it's a bit thicker, and while it doesn't seem like that big a difference, in reality, in kind of conjunction with the rest of this kit, it really combines into the idea that this is not a mobile suit, it is not a Gundam, it is a piece of essentially construction equipment that was modified to look like the Gundam, intentionally by the main character who is a fan of the One Year War Gundam in universe. This is essentially the Gundam universe equivalent of the Killdozer, if you know what that is in real life. So geometrically and sculpt-wise, of course, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of very interesting details on this kit. All of these inner piston details in the ankles and the forearms and the torso, all of it separately molded, always great to see. And it really kind of fits that idea that this is obviously, like, if you look close at it, nowhere near what the One Year War RX-78-2 Gundam looks like. But if all you know about it are, like, the stories and maybe a couple of grainy images from news broadcasts or something from that era, like, remembered 10 years later, then at a glance, just the silhouette and the colors and stuff would make you think that this is, in fact, the Gundam, which happens in universe. They think this is the Gundam because it's been 10 years since the One Year War. Most of the people seeing it have not seen the Gundam in person, so just seeing this, yeah, that might be the Gundam, who knows, which I think is really cool. The idea of this imposter Gundam that's used to kind of, I guess, strike fear into the hearts of Zeon or whatever. Again, very interesting stuff. So in terms of color accuracy then, I did end up using all of the color correcting stickers on the sticker sheet. I'm going to go over them now. Most of these are either small details or they're things that you would expect to see, so it's not something I'm really going to hold against this kit. So stickers 1 and 2 are of course going to be these eye stickers here in black and gold. Again, this really does kind of somewhat resemble the One Year War Gundam as it is intended to in universe, with the very slight red line that you can see underneath the eyes there, color separated part, which is always great to see. The mold on this head's actually really, really tight with how, like, thin with how thin the kind of red exposed part is, especially when you put the stickers in. So yeah, just be careful that you line the stickers out right so you can see that little red line. And of course, the intentional color of gold for the eye cameras there really does resemble the One Year War Gundam. Sticker 3 is going to be this tiny little yellow rectangle there. I don't know how well you can see that, but there's a little black stripe going down the middle. So it's a very tiny detail sticker. Definitely don't use tweezers for that one. I used a hobby knife to kind of work these stickers in because of how small they are. Sticker 4 is going to be the front head camera, as expected, like a little extended metallic green trapezoid there. Stickers 5 and 6 are going to be on the drill gun mounted on the hip here. for these yellow and black stripes, one for each side. Sticker 7 is going to be the rear head camera, also metallic green, normal sticker to see on high grade kits. Sticker 8 is going to be this tiny metallic red sticker in the torso there. Stickers 9, 10, 11, and 12 are going to be used on these circle tools on the back. I think these are the magnet anchors, I'm not exactly sure, for these 2 yellow semicircles on the underside of the magnet anchor. Sticker 13 is going to be this vertical yellow rectangle here on the crotch. And then sticker 14 you get 6 of for all of the little yellow circles on the magnet anchors. So yeah, so those are all the color correcting stickers. A lot of the details are covered by them, but of course not everything. Here are the color inaccurate parts that I noticed. So of course, on the inside of these chest vents, inside of this little rectangle on the shoulder, and in the sub thrusters in the shoulders, all of these are going to need kind of black void parts filled in. I used a black panel liner to do so. It's very easy to do. Those aren't things I would expect to be color accurate in most models, so that's pretty reasonable to have to do yourself, and it's quite easy to do. And then the rest of the color inaccurate parts that I noticed are all going to be in yellow. For these, I did use a dark yellow Gundam marker from one of the MSV marker sets. So this little yellow rectangle on the side unit on the head here, not sure exactly what this is. It almost feels like it's supposed to be like a Vulcan pod, but there's no barrel for it, so I don't know what this is. If you know, let me know in the comments. This little rectangle on the front is just molded in gray, as you would expect. I painted that in dark yellow. On the fronts of the knees, these little kind of, I guess, front sub thrusters here on the bottoms of the knees. The border around the black part is supposed to be in yellow. It is, of course, one black piece on the runner. Painted that in dark yellow. These tiny little sub thrusters on the backpack are supposed to be in dark yellow on the inside. They are not. Of course, this is just molded onto the gray piece. These separately molded sub thrusters here that you kind of slot in also need to be yellow on the inside. Sorry if the camera looked like it was fogged up there. I'm not sure exactly what happened. So all the thrusters are supposed to have yellow on the inside. So these large thrusters on the backs of the legs, I did paint in dark yellow. These medium thrusters on the backpack and these small thrusters on the backs of these kind of sub-units on the backpack are all supposed to be in dark yellow, and are all supposed to be kind of like a deep orangey yellow seen on the V-fin. I did clip the safety flags off of it. It looks way nicer once you do so. But anyway, so all of the thrusters are supposed to have dark yellow inside. I only painted in these 3 on the back. I kind of forgot about the side and the front of these units on the backpack. It's kind of annoying to get at with a Gundam marker, but I think it can be done if you have the will or you just use like a toothpick or something. As well as these thruster units on the undersides of the shoulders, again, also supposed to have dark yellow on the inside. So I don't know how well you can see that, but on the tops of the biceps, there's a small ridge on the top that is supposed to be in yellow. Of course, it is just in one piece, white on the runner. And then on the drill gun here, very similar to the color correcting sticker used in this lower part where the drill is. On the upper part, you can see some recessed stripe details right above the trigger. That is also supposed to be in yellow. It is not. This is in very high grade fashion, 2 halves are sandwiched together, so both of those are just going to be in black. So yeah, a lot of small yellow kind of detail painting is required to make a color accurate D Gundam First, but that's kind of to be expected with a high grade, even a nice modern one like this. Again, don't misconstrue the criticism I'm saying with saying that this model kit is like bad compared to modern standards. No, this is an excellent high grade. It's just a lot of small details that do need to be painted in typical high grade fashion. So yeah, aesthetically, this is a very interesting kit. Definitely the main draw of it, and it does the kind of exposed frame thing a lot better than a lot of other kits, like the Methus I looked at last week, which looked a lot like, which looked very prototypey and very kind of odd mock-up proof of concept like. And things like the Iron-Blooded Orphans kits, which have their own very weird jank proportions with their extremely tiny midsections and all that. This does the exposed frame very nicely, and it really does look like a modified kind of piece of construction equipment or a mech that clearly wasn't designed for combat. So for a quick size comparison, here is the high-grade D Gundam First next to a standard size high-grade, being the high-grade Blue Destiny Unit 1. In kind of very typical mid-UC fashion, where the height of mobile suits was getting inflated until it reached like the She Gundam and the Penelope, and then it quickly snapped back into being miniaturized for late UC. This is taller than a typical mobile suit. I don't know exactly how tall it is in lore, I'll throw it up on screen now, but this is significantly taller than a standard-sized high-grade. It is over a head taller, especially if you consider these like kind of sub thrusters connected to the backpack. So yeah, just keep in mind this will take up a lot of space on your shelf, especially when you're using the accessories with the like wire or whatever that take up a lot of extra space. So just something to keep in mind. So in terms of accessories, here's the D Gundam First and everything it comes with. This looks a little This might look a little sparse compared to what you were expecting, but we'll get into that in a second. So starting as usual with the hand options, you are going to be getting 2 standard high-grade holding hands with rectangular holes in them to slide in weapons, as you would expect, as well as a single open expressive hand for the left side. So this you can either use to hold one of the other accessories that I'll talk about later, just as like a handheld thing to hold in the palm, as an open expressive hand, but it's not the greatest for that given how hooked the hands are, or as a support hand for the beam shotgun, because that nestles in quite nicely into the hand, as you can see right there. So yeah, a lot of uses for this hand. It does look quite nice. Just a bit of a shame we don't get it for both sides. For beam sabers then, this kit has mounting points for both beam sabers. Like both of these side skirts here have a little hole to put an adapter with the beam saber in to mount on the side skirts, but it's only really supposed to have one, I think, and the other side's supposed to be used for one of its tool weapons that the D Gundam First has. So you do have this other beam saber as a spare. Not much to say about it. It's pretty much a standard beam saber, a little longer than like a typical beam saber, but again, beyond that, not much to say. To use with those beam sabers, you will of course get 2 standard 1/144th scale beam saber effect parts in clear pink. Not much to say. We've seen this a million times before. For the main ranged weapon of this kit, then we will have the beam shotgun, which is not really something you see all that often. This is a very cool accessory. It looks absolutely awesome, as you'll see in the posing section. Again, very rare that we see a beam shotgun. The only really other suits that you think of and you see that use shotguns are things like the Camphor, maybe the Ifrit. Even though the standard release Ifrit high grade, the Ifrit Schneid, does not come with a shotgun or anything, even though I think it used it in lore. This kit does, so this kit's one of the only kits to come with a shotgun here, so quite nice, very nice sculpting, but it is very high grade to have sandwiched together, one part for this barrel part at the end. So yeah, if you care about it, there is going to be a seam line running across the majority of this to clean up. And then we get into the kind of construction tool accessories, of which there are plenty, because this shield here, which is quite nice, mounts onto the back like so, has a ball joint, doubles as storage for the other kind of construction equipment tools / weapons. So if you pull off both panels, so starting with this one here, I just cut my nails, so it's a little hard to get into, but they do have these 2 ball things. I don't know exactly what these are, if these are like grenades or like inflatable dummy balloons or something, but these do pop off. And this is the accessory I was talking about, that the kind of promotional art and the manual shows that you can kind of have sitting in the hand like so, like it's about to throw it or something. So you'll see that in the posing section. But when it's not in use, of course, it will just slide onto one of the 2 pegs on this panel here. So behind that panel is stored this like kind of grappling hook thing, I think. It's very simple. It's literally 2 parts, the handle / gun part and the actual like hook. When it's in use, you detach the 2, attach the wire, one end into the grappling hook, other end into the handle here, and you can pose it like it's firing off the grappling hook, like it's gonna like zip off somewhere. Very simple accessory, not something I would really consider posing with this kit, but it's cool that it has it. And then underneath the other panel, right above these 2 things. I'm actually not exactly sure what these are supposed to be. I don't know if these are canisters that contain like extra ammo for the beam shotgun or something. I know it does have like in lore it's supposed to have like a number of different shells it can equip, so I think those might be that, but I'm not exactly sure. So underneath this other panel is going to be this, which I believe is supposed to be the rivet gun. You see like a kind of like top-loaded magazine here that presumably has a bunch of rivets. A tiny barrel piece here. This is a separate part, so just keep in mind that this right here is a gigantic loss risk, so be very careful when you're handling that. And when you want to use a weapon like this, that's what this other tiny wire is for. So one end will plug into the rivet gun to power it, and the other end will plug into the backpack. You see there's little holes, one on either side of these subunits here with the thrusters. The wire will just plug into there to give the illusion that the D Gundam First needs like an auxiliary power source to power its like tool weapons. So of course, besides those 2, the other 2 tool weapons that this kit has is the beam torch here. Very simple weapon, literally 3 parts to have the sandwich together. Large seam line down the middle as you would expect, and a tiny little barrel part that's sandwiched in between those 2. Not really much to say besides it exists like the beam torch does for the Master Grade Astray Red frame. It's there. I don't know if I would exactly use it. It's not really that interesting an accessory, but it's an option if you so choose. And then you get the largest of the tool weapons that the D Gundam First has, the drill gun here. So this does have 2 points to connect wires. You of course have a small point in the back here to power the drill gun using that small wire I mentioned earlier, plugging into the backpack, and then the large wire can be used to connect the drill when fired off to the gun, so like it's firing off the drill at someone. So yeah, very cool accessory there. I'm kind of excited to see how that looks. This is something I would consider posing with on the shelf just for how interesting an accessory it is. Oh, and then I almost forgot about these two. You have these two, which I believe are the magnet anchors. You can't really use the one on the left here. I think this is just supposed to be like a spare magnet anchor. The one on the right you can use. So as you can see, it is molded a little differently. There is a small yellow part at the bottom. This is supposed to be a handle, so you just slot this into one of the D Gundam First's hands, use the wire to connect the anchor to the handle, and like you could pose it like it's whipping out the anchor about to hit something. So that's also something you will see in the posing section. So yeah, plenty of accessories to use with the D Gundam First. Has quite the arsenal, and a lot of them are a little uninteresting, a lot of the tool weapons, but it is unique that it has them, and it's cool that they included them. So getting into articulation then, starting with the head. As you can see with this very thin neck, as you might expect, you can look very, very far up. This is a lot more than usual, and it's like excellent articulation. Similarly, you can look down quite far, basically into its own chest. The neck is on a double ball joint, so you do get a lot of back and forward with the neck action. Side to side tilt, you can get a pretty decent side to side tilt. You will, of course, get a full 360 out of the head. Just be careful that you don't collide, or you don't like break the antennas on anything, because they are fairly thin and fragile, especially if you cut the safety flags off like I did. For shoulders then, for forward swing, the joint will kind of pivot out of the peg in the torso to allow for a very, very full shoulder swing. Always nice to see. The shoulder can rotate independently of the arm. Unfortunately, all you're really going to get for side raises from the arm is about 90 degrees, nowhere near last shooting, but this should be more than enough for your purposes posing the D Gundam First. Full rotation in the upper bicep, as you would expect, but this large extended part out of the wrist. I think this is called like the arm punch or something like that. The arm buster. I don't remember exactly what it's called, but this will get in the way and collide with the waist fairly easily. A double joint in the elbow will give you almost a full 180 degrees before this large forearm armor will collide with the bicep. The wrist is going to be on a ball joint, which will do ball joint things, and then these arm things on the wrist will slide forward to be used as like knuckle guards if you want to pose it punching something. I might pose it using them, but these are fairly uninteresting as far as accessories go, and not really something I would pose the D Gundam using. For the torso then, for forward crunch, you will get a very extreme forward crunch. As you might imagine, with this very thin lower waist section, it does allow for a lot of crunch articulation. It allows for a lot of forward crunch articulation. Backwards, you don't get the most articulation, as you can see. It's a fairly minor back crunch, especially compared to the forward crunch. You do get some decent side to side, but the big weakness of these two being separate parts is it does hinder the rotation of the torso. As you can see, about all you're going to get from it is a 45-degree rotation, and it's going to be pretty much locked in terms of crunch. You can get it forward, but backwards, your options are very limited. On the backpack then, not really any articulation from these thrusters or these little sub-thrusters on the top. They can pivot a little bit side to side, but that's about it. In terms of the units themselves, they can fold down if you so choose, about that far, and they can kind of pivot side to side a tiny bit, but not all that much. In terms of the waist then, the two front skirts come together on the runner. I stepped them apart. You can get them about 90 degrees up. The side skirts, you can also get about 90 degrees up before they will want to pop off the waist. Back skirt is fixed in place as per usual. In terms of kicks then, for a forward kick, you will get about a little under 90 degrees there. For side raises, you will get just under 90 degrees. And then back kicks, just over 45 degrees. So decent articulation in terms of kicks, but not the greatest. As expected, you will get a full 360 rotation in the thigh, a full double bend in the knee. However, this large kind of flap right above this main thruster on the shin, or on the calf, will block a full double bend. So you will only get about 135 degrees. The ankle armor is kind of fused to the feet, so there's no articulation there. There is some toe separation, so you can get a very nice 90-degree downward toe bend. Don't know why you would do this, but you can if you want. Upward toe bend is going to be fairly limited, but you can pivot the whole foot forward a small amount. Downwards, basically non-existent, and side to side, not a great deal. So articulation is pretty solid in the upper half of the body, and the lower half it gets a little underwhelming, but let's see that articulation in action in some poses. So getting the D Gundam First into a bit of a spin, I'm going to be handling this a little bit different than usual. Normally I'll talk over each of the kit's kind of main poses, wielding each of the main accessories. In this case, I'm not going to do that. I'm only going to talk over specifically on a couple of the major accessories, some of the minor ones like the beam torch and the rivet gun. There isn't really much to say about them because they're so simple, so I'll just throw them up while I'm talking about the conclusion, just so you can see what they look like on the kit, but they aren't really worth talking at length over. So, getting it here into this running and gunning pose with the beam shotgun, doing a little bit different than usual. Instead of the running and gunning with like one hand firing off to the side, in this case I have the second hand acting as either a support for the shotgun or operating the pump. I don't know how a pump action beam shotgun would work, but it's fiction, so who cares. Anyway, this is a very cool pose. It's kind of reminiscent of something like the TF2 Scout with how he runs holding his shotgun with two hands. It's definitely much more unique than a lot of other kits can do. This kit, the open hand for the left side, works surprisingly well. It looks really natural, a lot more so than a lot of other open hands do when supporting weapons. This is a very rare instance of a two-handed grip of a weapon being one. Very easy to do. That shoulder swing is very nice and lets the D Gundam First grip the shotgun with two hands very easily. And two looks quite natural. Like, normally having one of these kits wielding its primary ranged weapon with two hands will look either very awkward or it's very difficult to do. It's very rare that you get both ease and aesthetic appeal in terms of how it looks wielding it with two hands. So yeah, this is an excellent way to use the beam shotgun. I'm honestly surprised. I was expecting to really like the pose where the D Gundam First is holding it in one hand, pointing it directly at the camera, like in a very confident pose, glaring down at you. But this is also an excellent option. Like, this is something I would definitely consider posing on my shelf. It's very rare that a running and gunning pose looks as good as this kind of does. And if I didn't mention it earlier, this kit is very stable. It's very easy to hit a one-legged pose, as you can see from those relatively large feet compared to the rest of the D Gundam First. So moving on to a crouching pose here, firing off the drill gun. Here I have the open hand kind of supporting the bottom of the pistol grip for the drill gun, kind of like how a two-handed pistol grip works in real life. Again, very rare that you can have a kit pull this off, like wielding a weapon with a pistol grip two-handed and have it look natural and good. Very surprising. And the drill gun is the most interesting of the tool weapons that the D Gundam First has. Definitely something I'm going to consider posing it using on my shelf. I haven't finalized exactly what the pose is going to be on the shelf for now. So this is definitely a contender. It looks fine kneeling. I wouldn't necessarily pose it kneeling myself. It can kneel very easily. This kit looks nice kneeling, but it looks a lot better when it's not kind of scrunching and compressing itself up. It looks the D Gundam First looks its best when it's kind of fully elongated, so the frame is exposed and you can kind of appreciate all of the inner details and varied geometries that this kit has when it's fully extended out and not scrunched up in a kneeling pose. It's stable and looks fine in a kneeling pose, but not something I would consider posing it doing myself. But the drill gun is something I'm going to consider using because it's a very cool weapon, and the wire is more than strong enough to hold up the drill. That goes for all the other things you can use the wire with. It's more than strong enough to hold up all of it. And getting the D Gundam First here into the air with the shield on the arm, firing off the grappling hook upwards while the beam shotgun is trailing behind it. This is the first pose that I've seen with the D Gundam that doesn't look great. I mean, the idea of it was I wanted it to do like kind of a Batman thing where it's raising its arm over its head, about to like lift off with a grappling hook while the beam shotgun is trailing behind. Can't really pull it off. Like you saw in the articulation section, the lack of a side raise beyond 90 degrees really hurts this kit. It's kind of hard to get it looking natural without fully rotating the shoulder, and that looks kind of gross. So this was the kind of middle ground I settled on, where it's leaping and firing off the grappling hook kind of forward and above in front of it. Looks kind of awkward. I know there are definitely ways to make the grappling hook work, but in the way that I was kind of intending to do it, in this very dynamic kind of flying away escaping pose, doesn't look the greatest. I wouldn't really consider it doing this on my shelf. The grappling hook is kind of interesting, but again, I think it's overshadowed by things like the drill gun in terms of how kind of unique and cool it looks using it. And here it is wielding the magnet anchor in the air, kind of whipping it downwards in a very similar kind of torso pose to what I did with the Huckbein Mark II Trombe, wielding its assault blade. This is very much a like slashing with a sword kind of swing, but it works here with this almost whip-like magnet anchor. Don't know exactly what this is for. If you know, let me know in the comments. I don't know exactly what this is, if it's like, if it can pop out like a buzzsaw, or if it's very similar to the grappling hook where it's meant for traversal. Not exactly sure what this is used for, but it's definitely unique, I'll give it that. And this wire, it does a lot. It does a lot for this kit, adds a lot to uniqueness, but it does take up a lot of space, so this is just something to keep in mind. If space is an issue, especially vertical space, I wouldn't really pose it firing most of the weapons using the wire. As I say, it doesn't look good because it does. It's just, I'm not exactly sure what the disc is, if it even is the magnet anchor, or if that's what the grappling hook is called. But, so I'm not exactly sure how it's supposed to be used, but looks fine doing it, which is something I would consider using on the shelf. So in conclusion, the D Gundam First is quite a unique high grade, while still working in all of the ways you would expect a kit to work, and is quite posable, unlike something like the Methos, which I took a look at last week, which was definitely not that. But this mobile suit, in quotes, because again, this is a mobile worker, essentially a piece of construction equipment that was modified to look like the RX-78-2 Gundam from the 1 Year War, because the main character of the Double Fake Under the Gundam manga was a big fan of it. It has an extremely interesting and unique aesthetic in that, at a glance, if you aren't familiar with the RX-78-2 in universe, you could definitely mistake this for the Gundam itself. If you're familiar with it, like many of you are, like I am, it has a lot of its own unique flair, especially with how kind of exposed the inner frame is. A lot more exposed inner frame than you normally see. It does the exposed like lower torso thing with the pistons on the sides a lot better than the IBO kits do it, in my opinion. It does it without looking super goofy like those kits do, without having like a giga hourglass figure. But the inner frame is detailed enough for a high grade that it does look pleasant. There aren't really any hollow spaces besides the undersides of the feet to worry about, and the very geometry of this kit gives it a lot of unique appeal compared to a lot of other high grades. Like, when was the last time you saw a high grade kit that has a piston on the underside of its forearm, because, again, it's a piece of construction equipment that, like, a bunch of mobile suit armor was bolted onto. Very unique, even down to the arsenal, wielding a bunch of, essentially, like, power tools. Like, it has a welding torch, it has a rivet gun, and it has a number of anchors, presumably to suspend itself while it's working on repairing things, and it has a power drill that it can attach to a wire and use as a ranged weapon. All of this is, like, super unique, and it's not something you really see, but again, a lot of those accessories, like the beam torch, the rivet gun, etc., is very similar to something like the beam torch that you see on the Stray Red frame, where, while it's a very unique option, it's not necessarily super interesting. Now, some of the tools, like the rivet gun, is made more interesting by the fact that you have a small wire to attach it to the backpack, so it has its own power supply, so that's a little interesting. But the show is very much stolen by things like the drill gun and the beam shotgun, where they're this kit's most unique weapons. They look great being wielded by this kit, and is certainly what I think most people is going to pose this kit using in if they have it. So yeah, those weapons are fantastic, but the varied arsenal you have is a big selling point of this kit. There's just so much you can pose this kit doing. You are not starved for choice at all. You're flooded with choice. You have so many things you can do. Now, in terms of the build, this is more involved than a standard high grade, with a lot of loss risk parts. That little horizontal line and that little module, like yellow circle in the upper torso right next to the shoulder. Things like the tiny little barrel tip on the rivet gun. All of those are very small, very easily losable parts, so just keep that in mind if you decide to get this kit. Other than that, the construction is completely fine. There weren't really any problems with it, in my opinion. Color accuracy is mostly good. You will just need to do a lot of small detail painting with orange-ish yellow paint if you want it to be completely color accurate, but it's a high grade. I think a lot of people were expecting to have to do that on a kit with as many small details as this. Honestly, it's a miracle that you'd have to do as little painting as you do to get it to be entirely color accurate. In terms of articulation then, this is this kit's weakest point. It's a little disappointing with things like the arms unable to go above 90 degrees to the side, the lack of leg kicks above 90 degrees, all of it kind of contributes to the inability to do certain poses, like I was talking about earlier. Being unable to do like a Batman grappling hook escape with the arm held over the head in a convincing way without kind of completely rotating the shoulder so it's upside down. It looks really unnatural. But if you can get around that, all of it kind of combines into this complete package that's incredible. It's highly unique in appearance and in arsenal, and it's a very solid build that can pull off most of the poses you would want it to. I didn't mention it earlier, but the shield looks fantastic. It's almost like a construction equipment like take on the RX-78-2 shield. It has the exact same shape, but it's in almost like a hard hat yellow, and it has like extra parts like bolted onto it. It looks makeshift, while it looks like professionally made, as in like a person with access to heavy machinery made it. It doesn't look militaristic, which really describes this kit in a nutshell. We haven't really had anything quite like this. and especially for the price, for $26, if you can find it without it being resold, if it gets reprinted on P Bandai in like a couple of months or whatever, easy recommendation from me. Like, this kit is fantastic. I think if you have access to premium Bandai, you don't have to deal with the resellers, you should absolutely try to get this kit when it's up. It does almost everything right. It is a fantastic kit, and one that I think would be a fantastic addition to any collection. So that was my review of the high-grade D Gundam First. What did you think of this kit? With how the inner frame runners were only listed as D Gundam and not specifically for the First, I'm really excited for when they decide to probably reuse those for a high-grade D Gundam Third. I don't know if they're going to do a second, because the D Gundam Second looks almost identical to the D Gundam First, with a slightly different torso and stuff like that. The D Gundam Third is very unique, and I really hope they do make a kit on that at some point. But what do you think of this kit? Let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, give it a like. If you like reviews like these, please consider subscribing to my channel. And I will see you next time with my review of the RE100 Gun Cannon Detector. I'll see you then.